So welcome back, everyone, and welcome back, Margot.
Hello, nice to see you.
Hey, it's great to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us for another session.
My pleasure.
And so, of course, you know, as with all of these videos, as with all of these exercises in this series, you know, this is not prescriptive, it's not exhaustive. It's important that you speak with someone who knows you and your situation and what's going to be right and wrong for you, perhaps, as the case may be. But the aim of this is to really, for us to learn from your experience, Margot, about some of these, you know, some of these exercises that can really help, and that can really help to support with arthritis, and be that at different stages of getting ready for a joint replacement or getting ready and moving on through each stage of recovery. But as ever, you know, of course, follow the plan from your physiotherapist, from your team. But the aim for these is to be a complement that can sit alongside those. And also, I think, as you say, as you touch on in the exercise video, you know, so some of these exercises are the ones that, you know, if you've been given more exercises, these are perhaps the ones that you might want to sort of retain from your plan if you're feeling that it's a bit of a tough day and that kind of thing. But, you know, and before we sort of go through them a little bit, is there anything else you'd want to expand on that?
Yeah, I think it's nice to have a few core exercises that you particularly find is really, really useful to you. So if you're having a heavy day or if you're particularly painful, it's about being able to focus just even a few minutes a day on that joint. And then you can always expand on that on a day where you have more time or you're feeling a bit better about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that, you know, that you raised in the last video that we did, and that's sort of been a bit of a recurring theme in these Joint School videos, is that it's about doing, you know, little and often, like the best exercises, really whatever you can keep doing for a small amount on a regular basis, and not to push yourself too hard, and sort of to learn to listen to your body.
Yeah, absolutely. And be very adaptable, and not get too worried about the fact that you might have to adapt this even on a daily basis, and sort of run with it, and know your own body. I think it's about that as much as anything else.
And also about using a combination of different things. So as we'll see in the video, it's a combination of stretching and strengthening, focusing on muscles around the joint that may be painful, but also other muscle groups. And then, of course, something that, you know, that we're not covered in in this set of exercises in particular, but of course, is sort of some kind of cardio or something that sort of gets you a bit sweaty and gets the heart rate up a bit. But, you know, that's for a different session, a different video.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think you want to do the stuff that's good for your joint, which is keeping it nice and mobile as you possibly can, but also keeping it nice and strong. But you have all the rest of your body that you can exercise really effectively. And again, adding that bit of cardio in, ideally it's something you enjoy doing alongside it, which is great.
Absolutely. So about the 5 exercises that you've chosen, what will people need to have at home to perform these exercises?
So I've made the exercises so that you can do it easily at home. There's no fancy equipment. You will need a chair. And again, you can choose what height of chair you use, depending on what stage you're at with this. You always want to have something that you can hold on to. So a lot of these exercises are possibly on one leg. So that we don't want you falling over or feeling that your balance is hugely compromised. So make sure you're somewhere where you get something that you can put your hands onto, particularly until you get used to the exercises and you know how confident you can be. So you need a chair. You need somewhere where you can possibly put your leg out. As you'll see, I've used a wooden bench that I use with my kitchen table, but you can do this on your couch if it's big enough. You can do it on the floor if getting on and off is not too difficult for you. And you can actually do them on your bed. Although it's a bit softer, it's still doable. And I have shown you some exercises on the floor, but also, again, you can do these on your bed if you find getting on and off the floor is hugely difficult.
Okay. And then, so if we look at each exercise that you've chosen a bit more particularly, what are there any particular sort of comments or notes that people should be aware of with them?
Yeah, so I think, so some of them are stretches. Now with your stretches, the joint, you'll often find if you've been sitting for a while or you get up first thing in the morning, the joint can be traditionally quite stiff. So it's quite nice to keep that mobilized and stretched. So my advice to you in general would be to do these little and often. So find times in your day, you know, if you're sitting with the kettle on, if you're sitting watching your favorite TV program, just find times in the day where you can move the joint and stretch the joint. So I would say little and often with the stretches. Now with the strengthening ones, we really want you to feel as though you're getting tired, you know, that gym type tiredness that you get. So if you choose your exercise correctly, you're hoping that you get tired before you get painful. I think if you have an exercise that you're trying to strengthen yourself with, but pain is the overriding thing, there's really not much chance of you getting significant strength in that joint. So that's where exercise selection comes in. And this is where your health professionals like your physiotherapists can really help devise a good program that suits you. So with the strengthening, feel as though you're really working it. So you're having to push it that wee bit harder. And if you're managing to do that, you probably don't want to be doing these every day particularly. So these are things that you maybe want to spend 3 or 4 times a week focusing on the strengthening part of things. Yeah, is that quite clear? So little and often for stretching, several times during the day, but you're strengthening, if you get it right and you get that gym type feeling, you want to always feel as though you're getting tired in the one session, but you maybe only need to do a few of those sessions a week.
Yeah, I think that's a really worthwhile point, and just highlighting that it can be less about focusing on a particular set of target repetitions or something that you might find in a description of an exercise online or even on an exercise sheet or plan that you've been given, and more about, again, you know, sounding a little bit like a broken record, but about listening to your body and doing a strengthening exercise until you start to feel tired rather than focusing on a number.
Yeah, because these numbers have really been brought for people that, you know, your gym type programs are for people that have no pain with normal joints. And so you can have this very methodical progression depending on what you're trying to achieve. Unfortunately, the nature of osteoarthritis is not like that. So we just have to change our mindset a little bit about it, but find what makes it tired. If you can do that, then great. You will really see strength gains, which will hopefully have an impact on your pain, but more importantly, improve your function and give you the best function that you can have, which is really important.
And as you do, you know, go through the repetitions of an exercise until you start to feel tired, you may well find that it's not the same number each day or each time you do it, and that's something that, you know, we just need to learn to acknowledge and accept that there's going to be some days where you're stronger than others. There's going to be some days where it's a bit harder to do the exercise than others, and that's also part and parcel of it, and just keep to keep going with it. And again, it's about accepting that and accepting where you are that day, and not focusing on a number or on sort of an external target so much.
Yeah, consistency is important. So as long as you're consistently doing things, even if you're only doing it to a limited amount on one day or even a few weeks, you know, sometimes you'll have flares that can last more than a day. So it'll often be a period where you're maybe doing them far less, but as long as you're sort of doing them a few times a week, just to maintain that, then that's great. But it is frustrating. I accept the fact that it is really hard to get that right all the time.
And so some of the other challenges with these exercises, and I know from personal experience, particularly you mentioned quite a few times about sort of doing a movement slowly and with control, and in particular controlling the pelvis and sort of angling the pelvis in different ways.
Yes, so I think that what we often find is that your body will find the path of least resistance, which is wonderful, you know, so it allows your body to do things that if it kept on the same track all the time, it maybe wouldn't manage to do that. But you want to, in your exercise sessions, try and address those adaptations that you may be doing when you're walking, turning, bending. So really that's when you want to be really focusing on your sort of pelvic control, your hip control. Even with knee problems, it's really important what you're doing higher up. So if we can address that in a sort of relatively pain-free manner, then that should be advantageous for you.
Super. Well, in terms of the other exercises, as we move through, is there anything else you'd want to add about so we've talked a bit about stretching and strengthening, and of course the importance of having a sturdy support to hand for any standing exercises, and also the standing stretches. There's one thing you mentioned about hip extension, and how arthritis can lead to problems with sort of extending the hip fully, and how that can cause a shorter stride length. Can you expand a little bit on what the impact of that could be? Yeah,
sure. So basically, traditionally, if you have arthritis in your hip or your knee, you will lose the ability to extend that leg out. So basically, things become or feel contracted. Now, that's why, again, the stretching is really important, that you maintain the movement in there that you've got. But what will often happen is your stride length, which is basically, how long you can move one foot in front of the other when you walk. You'll often find that will limit that movement. So you really want to you'll see in the videos when we do the stretching, it's really giving you that sort of lovely, big, elongated sort of stretch, which again, if you find it's too painful to do it when you're walking, if you mimic a stretch, you will maintain as much of that as you possibly can. And I'm a really big believer in walking aids. They're called walking aids for a reason. And the reason they're walking is because they help you, they aid you to walk better. And quite often you'll find with just that wee bit of support, you'll be able to get that more normal sort of stride length and that more normal walking pattern, which is generally much more effective for us to try and adopt.
Okay, interesting. And so can you tell us a little bit more about the type of walking aids that you're a particular fan of?
Yeah, well, anything that you need. And again, there's a progression upwards, isn't there? So you would traditionally start with a walking stick. So people are very resistant with regards to walking aids. And I often say, look, try it and see, if you don't like it, that's fine, but try it. And I think once they're open-minded about it and they try it, they find they can go for longer walks. They can maybe just be slightly less painful. You often don't have to take it everywhere you go. I think that's the other thing, that this is not something that should be attached to you 24 hours a day. But it generally does, certainly the early stages, improve your walking pattern, and actually allows your legs to work harder. So by taking that little bit of weight off it, you can often find that you can swing the leg through. And this is for knee or hip problems. You can swing that leg through and you'll activate your muscles more when they're not predicting that they're going to have to take all this weight, and it's being helped by the walking aid. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of them.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that echoes something from one of the very first Joint School sessions we did around. That was, in that case, it was particularly around knee replacement surgery, and I think the conversation there was sort of highlighting that people shouldn't necessarily be in a rush to move away from crutches after surgery, and really you're ready to move away from the crutches when you're almost walking normal. You're able to return to sort of what is a normal walking pattern, a normal gait, normal stride.
Yeah, I think patients think that it's giving in if they take a stick. They think it's giving in. I'm not going to give in to this. I'll become reliant on it. Actually, it gives you freedom. It gives you a bit more distance to be able to walk. It allows you to be less painful. So when you go and meet your friend for a coffee, post-COVID, obviously, that you're not as painful by the time you get there because the stick has helped you a little bit. And yeah, it's often in patients' mind, again, post-operatively, it's that goal of, I've got rid of my crutches, so I must be brilliant. Even although really, when you look at their gait pattern, they should have probably kept them for a bit longer.
And again, I think psychologically it can be useful to just know that they're there as a bit of a backup. If you're going somewhere, just to make sure that you've got a stick or a pair of crutches in the car. Whether or not you end up using them is a different thing, but to know that, if it turns out to be a bit of a rocky day, you've got a bit of support there as well.
Exactly. You don't need to use it all the time. Some people might just need to do it if they're walking a bit further because the weather's nicer. That's a good enough reason to have them. Yeah.
Now I see it's a beautiful sunny day in Glasgow.
Yes, I know.
I don't want to keep you from that, and I certainly have a tendency to talk on for more than what's needed. I think let people get cracking with these exercises, and thank you very much for putting them together for us.
So let's get started with our top 5 hip exercises. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but I think some of these are really important things to try and incorporate in your exercise regime. And particularly if your hip gets sore when you exercise it, or you don't have much time, then these, I think, give you some of the essential things that you want to try and maintain and possibly improve in and around your hip. So the first one we're going to go over is a mobility exercise, flexing your hip up and extending it back behind you. Now, I'm going to show you varying ways you can do it. You can do it in standing. So with this, because you're on one leg, you might want to hold on. You're just going to take that hip up and try and bring it back. Now with this, try not to let yourself collapse down and arch up. Try and make sure you're focusing on trying to keep this pelvis level as you can. I'll show you that from the side. So you're just going to lift it up, bring it back, lift it up and bring it back. Again, you can hold on to something if you need to. I'm going to also show you some variations in lying down. Now I think these are really nice. They are quite a bit harder, but they work quite a lot of muscles in and around your back and around your pelvis, which can be really, really nice. So the first one we're going to look at is it's the same activities you were doing in standing. You're going to flex the knee up and the hip and then extend back behind you. Now, what's nice about this exercise is you start to feel your shoulder blades and things in your back working, and possibly your gluteals a little bit more. It's tricky, but try and keep this lower pack from sort of swinging out to the side or extending up. So almost think about having a book on your lower back there, and try and keep everything else straight as you come forward and up. And you'll really, makes me out of breath, you know, I'm really working quite hard in lots and lots of different areas to try and achieve that. So that's useful. The next one is actually again on your hands and knees, and what you're going to try and do with this is you're going to come back, stretch your arms forward if you can, just come back to how far you can, obviously go to where your comfort allows, and then you're going to come forward and extend up. So again, I'm now stretched in the front of my hips there. Again, I can feel my shoulder blades work quite hard. Again, coming back to flexion and then coming up into extension. So they're just 3 varying ways in which you can try and maintain that lovely flexion and extension into your hip. The next one is also a stretch really for the front of your hip. You find in many hip conditions, but particularly with osteoarthritis, you tend to lose the ability to extend our hip. So again, it shortens your stride length when you're walking. So we want to try and maintain that if we can. So with this, we're going to do what would be traditionally known as a quad stretch. So my heel's off the ground for this. I'm up nice and straight. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just tuck my pelvis in underneath here. Okay, so I'm going to go from there to there. Now already I've got a pretty strong stretch at the front of my hip here, so I'm stretching this whole area. I probably don't need to go any further, but if you want to go further, what you would do is you would sort of lunge down, and then you'll feel just a wee bit more of a stretch at the front here. You can also, if you want to add in a bit of a side flexion. Again, you can hold on with the other arm if you need to. So if I show you that from the front, this is the leg I'm stretching, and all I'm going to do is tuck my pelvis on underneath. I'm going to come down just a little bit into a lunge if you need to feel more of a stretch. Then I'm going to take that arm up and take it off to the side, and you'll feel a really lovely stretch all around that area. Super. So the next one we're going to go over is an exercise that I think is really useful, and again it covers lots of different things. So I'm going to put a sock on for this and I'll show you why. So what we're going to do here is we're going to stand on one leg. Now as soon as I take this foot off, this hip here, my standing leg hip, and my pelvis is having to actually work quite hard to hold me there. So what's lovely is both legs are working. So even if you only have a problem on one side, I do suggest that you try and do this exercise on both sides, swap it over. So from here, now the reason I've got the sock on is so that my foot can slide. You don't need to have the sock on, you don't also need to put your foot on the ground. If you don't, you can have it sort of up here, but I like the ground because what I like to do is I like to push into the ground, so I can push forward, I can push out to the side, and I can push back behind me. I can also do big kind of circles, things that your hips are generally not used to doing. So it's strengthening, it's stabilising, and it's also a bit of a stretch all at the same time, and it's just quite nice to do. So again, that would be in my top 5. The next one we're going to look at doing is sit to stand. So again, with this, what's nice about it is the fact that it's a really functional exercise. So if you have the chair lower, it's a little bit harder. If your chair's a bit higher, it's a little bit easier. Again, if you try and do it nice and controlled and nice and slowly, again, it makes it just that wee bit harder. Keeping myself nice and elongated as I come up and down. Now what you can also do is you can start to take much more weight on one leg. I'll show you that from the front, which again makes it a much harder exercise. I'm going to concentrate and focus and take all my weight through this leg. This foot, my toes are on the ground, but they're really just there for balance. And really 90% of my weight is through this leg here. Again, try nice and slowly, try and keep yourself sort of nice and balanced as you do that. So that's just a progression on from that. My last exercise is a bridge really, and again I like this because it works lots of different areas. It works a lot around the extension of our hips here. It gives us a nice quad stretch as well. It's also great because it's got lots of gluteal activity going on. Now, a lot of people with osteoarthritis of their hips have got a little bit of back pain, so if you do, I would just be a wee bit cautious with this to begin with. Some back pains love this, others really don't like it. So watch when you're coming right up that you're not over enthusiastic, particularly at the beginning. So with this, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to push my lower back down into the ground. Again, I can feel my core sort of engaging into that area. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze my hips, my buttocks, and I'm going to come up. Now again, if you try and thrust yourself up really high, that's when you tend to put a bit more pressure on your back. You don't really need to come up that high. And I can certainly feel a nice stretch. My quad's working really hard even just in this position here. My hands are not doing anything, my feet are not doing anything, but I'll feel lots of activity round about here. Okay, so if I just show you that again. Again, I'm pushing my lower back down into the bed. I'm squeezing my glutes, everything else nice and relaxed, and I come up and there's lots of activity there. Now again, with this, you put a bit more weight through one leg than the other if you want to make one side work a little bit harder. A bit like the sit to stand, you would just take, so I'll just put my toes on the ground on this side, so it means that the leg closest to the wall is having to work quite a lot harder. Again, trying to just keep that pelvis nice and straight, so it's not working just too hard. So they're my top 5 things that I think you should try and work on, and hopefully you'll find them useful.